Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is another instalment from the wonderful mind of Edward Ed Smith. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, why not hashtag Team Fear. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Disappearances of Deep Fork River Bottoms. Episode 2, Side by Side to Oblivion. Let's get straight into that. The Schrodinger Equation acts on the entire probability that amplitude is not merely an absolute value, a differential equation which forms the basis of the quantum mechanical description of matter in terms of the wave-like properties of particles in a field. Its solution is related to the probability density of a particle in space and time. Thus, when the crests of one wave line up with the crests of another, you get constructive interference, bright bands. And when the crests align with the troughs, you get destructive interference, darkness. The birth of quantum physics in the early 1900s made it clear that light is made of tiny, invisible units or quanta of energy, which we call photons. Nate Gunner is a native of Okmulgee, Oklahoma. He is 31 and a construction expert in framing, concrete and brickwork. You name it, and he is good at it. His dad put him to work at the age of 13, and he has been building things ever since. He stays active with his job and all his extracurricular activities, hunting, basketball and fishing. And he is, well, one hot piece of property. At least that's what his boyfriend Marty Jennings thinks of him. Marty is a 38-year-old critical care nurse at the Hillcrest Hospital in Tulsa, and had been doing it for about 14 years. Marty was born and raised in Stillwater, Oklahoma, land of the Oklahoma State University Cowboys. Nate and Marty have been dating and seeing each other for about 15 months now, and while they won't admit it, they would like to take it to the next level. Yeah, it's time to cohabite. However, Nate has been really mulling it over and over and over and over. Yeah, is he really ready to grow up and make that jump? Nate asks himself repeatedly. It's been hot this August, not untypical, but it's pretty warm. Nate knocked off the job about 3 p.m. as the heat built in, and before his back got really crisp, he shuts down his crew, and this job has a lot of time to build into it, and so he doesn't get concerned about it. And he'll take an arse chewing from his dad and make up the time on Monday morning. He goes to his truck and takes off his tool belt and tosses it into the back seat of his 2019 Dodge Ram truck, and then grabs an old t-shirt off the dash, and wipes the sweat from his face, neck and upper body. His work shorts are already drenched in sweat of the day. His feet, they're in the furnace-like work boots, in which he kicks off just outside the driver's door. Throws them in the back of the truck bed to dry out over the weekend. He then peels off his socks and throws them in the back of the truck bed too. And with 30 or 40 other pairs of socks, he grabs his flip-flops off the floorboard of the driver's side of the truck, slides into them and says, "Oh, paradise exists." For a man like Nate, that's a huge step. I can't believe he's going to do it, but here it goes this weekend. They spent Tuesday night together, and they haven't really talked much since their schedules, and it's tough to get together sometimes. Nate is unsure if he is truly ready, but he knows that it is harder to be apart than it used to be. Sometimes it even hurts. His buddy and crew member Travis always teases him about it. Ooh-wee, he's in love, baby. The only reason that Travis gets away with it and not having Nate throttle him is because he introduced him to Marty at Boots and Diamonds, a local mixed bar in Tulsa. Nate didn't like the bar scene, but really had several bad experiences with the online dating scene, and so we took a chance, and it actually worked out so far. Now it's time to get that man on the phone and start this weekend. Nate grabs his cell phone and selects Marty's number, and before he pushes it, he stops and takes a breath and says to himself, "Oh, you bastard. What are you about to get yourself into, boy?" Taking a long drink from his water bottle, he exhales and pushes send. Marty's voicemail greeting alerts, Nate grimaces and then speaks. "Hey babe, this is your man speaking to you. Give me a call. I see you in your dreams. Yeah, you know which ones." He presses end and puts his forehead on the fender of his truck and says in a low whisper, "Why the fuck did I do that?" Marty makes his last rounds of the shift and starts his charting for the 11 patients in his charge. The intensive care unit is alive with activity and has been all through his shift. The duty nurse is walking towards him and he diverts into another aisle to try and get away from Allison when she says, "Stop, I already see you." "Oh no, not this weekend," Marty begs. "Tyra is out of town and Gary broke his leg yesterday. I have no one else. Please," Allison begs. You're killing me, Allison. I'm already into overtime, and I mean overtime. Besides, I really want to see Nate," Marty whines with puppy eyes. "I'm sorry, Marty. I need you," Allison says. At about that time, the voicemail notification goes off. "When it rains, it pours," Marty said to himself. Marty hits the send button, and Nate's phone lit up. "Oh yeah!" Nate exclaimed. "Hey, big man," Nate says, jokingly seductive. "Hey, Nate, I'll meet you in shelter at your house tonight," Marty says. "I thought we could meet at your place. They're in Tulsa, and we were going to go out on the town," Nate questioned with disappointment. We'd be better if we met down at your house. It's been a long day, babe," Marty said, sounding beat. No problem. I'll meet you there," Nate said. He hangs up the phone and says, "Fuck, this is going to suck big ones," to himself in frustration. As the night moved forward, Nate comes to terms with the fact that the weekend is truly messed up, but tonight is theirs. Nate and Marty passionately embrace on the couch and decide to have a night together, right there on the floor of the living room, with just some extra pillows, blankets, and each other. When they finish, Nate and Marty collapse together, embraced on the floor, and Nate goes to ask him the question. Marty turns and asks him what he said, and Nate just plays it off. "I'm just catching my breath, baby. You okay?" Marty nods as Nate rolls off him and lands on his back, and Nate is staring at the ceiling fan, and he says to himself, "You chicken shit, why didn't you say it?" Nate gets up and walks across the living room to the kitchen. "Hey babe, do you want a beer?" Marty answers, "Yeah, sweet, please." As he gets the beers, Nate passes the mirror on the wall just outside the kitchen, and he mouths the words, "You chicken shit." Later that night, Marty is sleeping on his right side as Nate is spooned up next to him, and then says to himself in a low whisper, "I love you. I fucking love you." And then he goes to sleep. Bzz, bzz, bzz. As the alarm goes off and Nate says, "God damn it, I fucking hate that sound," Marty says, "Yeah, it's the only one I can wake up to." Clock says 5 a.m. "Babe, can't you just call it in? Please?" Nate begs. Marty says there is no way. There is no one to cover for me. Nate begs softly and Marty answers, "As much as I want to, baby. I can't. Now let me up. Please, let me up." Nate moves and Marty makes it to the bathroom to begin the day, and Nate holds up on the couch, watching Marty get ready. And Nate says to himself, "Why can't you just say the words, you asshole?" Marty is then walking out the front door and Nate follows him butt-ass naked and stands on the front porch while Marty is getting into his truck. Marty says, "I'll be back tonight. You can keep the floor warm for me." He winks and Nate nods, and while biting his lip to keep him from crying, Marty starts the truck and heads down the driveway and then up onto Highway 75 north into Tulsa. Nate is standing on the porch, butt naked under the bright porch light, and looks at his 2018 Polaris RZR 1000 high lifter side by side, sitting there next to the big old oak tree with a large logging chain around it for security. Nate nods and says, "But first things first." He walked into the house and went to get a shower, turned it on, and about 20 minutes later, he felt a lot better. He trailered his side-by-side and hooked up the trailer up to his pickup, got his snake boots on and his cargo shorts on, and then threw on his John Deere tractor shirt, the one he met Marty in that night at the bar. He threw some stuff on his ice chest and then set off for the Deep Fork National Wildlife Refuge, public use western area, from his house. It's about a 2-hour trip. He hadn't been there for several years. He slowly turned into the parking area, which looked almost abandoned, as the grass had not been mowed in some time. The gravel had several large chug holes, and the access road wasn't maintained at all, and the sign had fallen off the post. Nate then turned the truck and trailer into one of the elongated parking slots, which wasn't well marked as it was when he and his older brother Mason were here last time. He reckoned about 4 or 5 years before. He killed the engine and sat there wondering if he should just go back home. It really wouldn't be any fun without anyone with him, but he then decided that he should at least run the Razor for about 45 minutes, just because. Nate's head wasn't really into it, as he turned the Razor down the first path, which had a lot of debris from not being maintained. He slowed to a crawl and went to grab his cell phone to send Marty a text, and then realised he'd left his phone in the truck, and the truck was about 4 miles away. "Well, shit," he exclaimed. He stopped the side-by-side and he put his head against the steering wheel and said, "I hate doing this shit alone." At that point he decided he would go down another 1.5 miles and to where he knew the trail would turn into a T, and there he would turn around, go back, trailer up and get the hell out of this place. He reached the T in the trail and whipped the Razor around and gunned it back towards his truck. Nate was now rolling down the trail at a blistering pace, and then out of the corner of his right eye he saw a flash of bright light blue light. Then he felt the right side of his Razor pop up like it rolled over something in the road. And just then the Razor lunged forward and flipped over on its left side, and then turned end over end and coming to a rest on top of its roll cage. Well, if it wasn't for his Axel helmet, it would have really rung his bells pretty good. He released the seatbelt and fell on his head and was jammed up in the dashboard for a little while, and then he crawled out of the roll cage and slowly came to his feet, using the roll cage bars as handholds to gain his footing. And when he saw several flashes of light that seemed to shimmer and glare in his eyes, along with the debris and dirt in his face, it was very difficult to focus, and then the odour hit him, the heavy smell of ozone. It is by avoiding the rapid decay into the inert state of equilibrium that an organism appears to be so enigmatic. Erwin Schrodinger. Marty pulled into Nate's driveway. He noticed that his truck was not there. It was about 9 p.m. and well on its way to getting dark, and he said, "Okay, this is strange." He then walked up onto the porch and reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys and unlocked the door. Walking into the living room, it was much like he had left it this morning. The blankets and pillows on the floor, beer bottles. This just didn't feel right. He pulled out his phone and called Nate. It rolled on over to voicemail. He then sent a text and it said, "Delivered." He waited for around another hour and then he called Travis. He said that he hadn't heard anything from him and he would start towards Nate's house. While en route to Nate, he called Mason. And Mason and his stepbrother Jason and his cousin Keith, and they would meet him at Nate's. And by the time that Travis, Mason, Jason and Keith arrived at almost the same time as they were all driving up the driveway, Marty was walking out onto the porch and the boys grouped up on the porch and were talking amongst themselves. "Did Nate not say where he was going?" Mason asked. "No, nothing," Marty said. "Well, his haul trailer is gone." Keith spoke and pointed. "There, the side-by-side's gone too," Jason said. "Okay, that leaves about 1,000,000 places he could go," Mason said with a smart-ass attitude. "Oh shit, hang on," Marty then said. "What is it?" Jason asked. "Hang on, we had our location settings on so we could find each other. It's working. Sometimes it takes a little time, but... there," Marty said excitedly. "That's Stroud, Milfay," Jason said while looking over Marty's shoulder. "Damn, that's halfway to Oklahoma City," Mason said, shocked. "Wait, Jason, isn't this where we went several years ago? You know, all of us went down there," Keith said as Jason looked intently. Yeah, it is. Western Deep Fork Bottoms area, yeah." "Why did he go over there? To ride?" Jason said with surprise. "All right, boys, we gotta go. Let's hit it," Mason ordered. "Marty, you're riding with me," Travis said. Yeah, you ride with him," Mason said with disdain in his voice. The boys got into the trucks and tear out of their 2-hour drive to the location on the map. Marty checks it from time to time to see if Nate's phone had moved. It has been stationary the whole time. Travis relays the information to Mason, and his lifted Chevy diesel truck is not as fast as Travis's, so Mason's in the lead, and that way no one is left behind. I thought it was strange that he didn't text me all day. I thought it was because I didn't take off work, Marty said, voicing his concern. We'll find him. He should have told someone. He knows better than this, Travis said with a little anger in his voice. Mason really doesn't like me much, does he? Marty said. No, he has a problem with him thinking of Nate as being gay, and anything surrounding that is a subject to his glare. But he is worried about Nate, and so am I. It's just not like him, Travis explained. I should have took off work, but there was no one there to cover for me. Damn it, Marty said with disgust. Hey, don't beat yourself up about it. He probably has a dead battery and he's sitting down there on his tailgate, playing with himself or doing something unnatural to nature, Travis said jokingly. Yeah, it's scary, I could see that, Marty said, halfway serious. The two trucks pull onto the access road and Mason kicks on his 3 light bars, and the area in front of the truck explodes into daylight, and the trucks bump down the road, which is a rough ride. The trucks and the lights penetrate the night, with stark movement of shadow and form. As the trucks round the turn in the road, the light bars illuminate and cause the tail lights on Nate's trailer to glow, and then the tail lights of his pickup come into view shortly after. Mason guns his truck up to the trailer, hops out followed by the other boys, and Travis and Marty are not far behind. Mason walks up to the driver's side door and checks in to see if it's locked. It is. He punches in Nate's birthday into the keyless entry pad on the other side of the door handle. Mason only knows it because he helped Nate program it almost a year ago. He opens the door and finds his phone on the floorboard of the passenger side. Mason told the others, and Jason said, I think he went down this trail. All the other trails don't have dirt kicked up like this one. Hey Mason, your truck is the only one of the 2 that can get down this trail. Alright, everyone in my truck. He looks at Marty and says, even you, and walks away. Jason looked at Marty and says, let's go, Bubba, while shaking his head back and forth. Mason turns the truck to line it up with a small entrance between the trees of the trail, and the truck moves slowly down the trail, and the tire marks and the loose dirt throws from the tires of the Razor make it easy to follow, but the trail is very rough and narrow for such a large vehicle, and the motion of the truck is intense, pitching and rolling forward and back, and the tree branches whipping by the mirrors and bouncing down the sides of the truck. One of the tree limbs whips around and smacks the window on the passenger side crew door and cracked it right near Jason's face. Damn, Bubba! Mason, take it easy, Jason said. It's this fucking trail. A goat would have a hard time following it, Mason said. How far are we? Jason asked. We're about 2 miles in. The side-by-side trail is still very visible. My bro was cutting it up through here pretty bad, Mason said. The truck continues to pitch and roll with the rough and unpredictable terrain of the trail. The limbs and branches that were whipping by the windows was a torrent of leaves and twigs. The noise was like that of wind and a hailstorm. Even with the slow speed, it was a mass of motion, and the windshield wasn't much better. The passenger side windshield wiper was ripped off about a mile ago, and Mason's truck is taking a beating. He had hit his front differential several times, and the truck's frame too many times, but his brother is out there, and nothing will deter him from finding him. After all, one time when Mason got so drunk, when he was 19, it was Nate that saved him by turning him over onto his stomach so that if he was vomiting, he wouldn't choke to death. Nate would come looking for him, and this is the driving force that had Mason on the warpath, and he would not be hindered in his actions. As the torrent of vegetation continued to swirl about the truck rounded the trail to the right, and the light bars illuminated Nate's Razor that was resting on the top of its roll cage. The Razor was about 200 feet from the front bumper, and Mason rolled up slowly and stopped about 100 feet from the Razor. He shoved the truck into park and pulled the transfer case caliber. He jumped out of the truck and ran to the overturned Razor, calling out for Nate, followed by the rest of the group. Jason started backtracking the deep gouges in the dirt trail where the Razor apparently started flipping and started looking. As he pulled the flashlight off his hip, he found the place where it looked like he started losing control, and he noticed some of the vegetation was extremely wilted, and the surrounding vegetation was not just in a 10-foot diameter circle. He thought that this was weird, and his cell phone started acting like it was having trouble getting a signal. The further he got away from that spot, it started acting normal. He stood back from that area and took several photos and walked back to the group. "What do you guys have back here?" Jason said. Well, it seems that he got out of the seat harness and got his helmet off, and after that I don't know where he went," Travis explained. About that time, Mason climbed up on top of the hood of his truck and cupped his hands up to his mouth and started calling for Nate over and over in every direction. Several others joined in. Keith nudged Jason and said, "Hey, your brother's gonna lose it. You know that, right?" And Jason looked at Keith and nodded and said, "Yeah, this isn't gonna be good." "Look, we gotta get some other people out here. We gotta call somebody," Jason said. "Hey Mason, we're gonna need to drive back and call for someone and lead them back out here," Travis then said. Mason said, "Alright, okay, Jason, you know how to drive my truck, and you take Travis and Marty back and call people out here. Keith and me will stay out here, and just in case Nate comes back. Keith, you still have your rifle in that truck, right?" Keith nodded. "Okay, go get it. Jason, you better get going." Keith grabbed his rifle and backpack and several bottles of water, as well as his gun belt, and Jason spoke to Mason. "We'll be back as soon as we can, brother. Call us if he comes back, and we'll turn around and come back and get all of you." Jason started the truck and began the moves to turn in and around the small area by pushing over trees. "You think he's hurt?" Marty asked, and Jason answered, "That razor flipped end over end at least 4 times, and that's enough to jar the head out of anybody. Here, take a look at this," and Jason showed him the pictures. "It looks like these leaves have had heat put to them, but these leaves are normal, and they're just inches away, and look, right here, doesn't that look like an arc? Look at the way it moves around." Marty said, puzzled and under his breath, "Damn, I should have stayed." As the truck pitched and rolled its way down the trail, and they drew closer to the trailhead. About 30 minutes after the truck started back to the trailhead, Keith had thrown out about 8 white chem sticks, and they were illuminating the area, and his battery-operated collapsible lanterns, of which he had 2, provided enough light that they could see the surrounding area. "Hey, I've had this question all damn night. Why did he not walk back the way he rode in? And on the other thing, he's come along with a winch in that toolbox. He could have turned this thing over. It's nothing new to him. He's done it before. It's like he had to leave quick for some reason, like he had no time to think," Mason said, as Keith listened intently. "I don't understand it either, Mason. Nate was just too in tune with driving these side-by-sides. I mean, hell, he's the one who showed me how to drive these things," Keith said, exasperated. "Something's not right here. It's just not right," Mason stated. "I just want to find my brother and get him home. It's just not right." "Hey Mason, is Nate really seeing this dude Marty?" Keith asked. "Why do you ask?" Mason restrained. "I was just curious. Nate really doesn't seem the type. I mean, he really didn't strike me as being queer. He's not. He's just playing around. He isn't serious about this guy. I know my brother, you know. If I could find a girl that I thought would interest him, I would hook them up in a snap. And then Marty will be history. I just gotta find him the right girl." Almost 2 hours pass, and it's about 4 a.m, and then Mason's phone rings. It's Jason, letting them know that they got back to the trailhead, and Marty and Travis are on the phones calling the sheriff's office and the game wardens. Jason also informs Mason that the transmission temperature is running hot and asks what he should do. Mason told him to put some more trans fluid in and check the coolant in the intercooler and make sure the compressor cable hasn't come loose as it does from time to time, and then let the truck run idle for about 30 minutes to bring the temperature down. At about 5 a.m, Jason calls Mason and says that they'll bring out 3 deputies and 2 game wardens, and search and rescue from Stroud and Bristow will be out at about 7 a.m. and that the compressor cable had come loose, and he reattached it, and now everything is fine. 7:30 a.m, Jason arrives at the razor's location. The deputies get everybody into pairs, and then they begin to sweep a 360-degree out to about 300 yards from the razor. Jason and Keith are paired up and began the search their section. After about 2.5 hours, they were nearing the farthest that their sweep was to extend, when they spotted something that was reflecting light shimmering from it. As they approached, they began to see the shimmering was from reflective striping on what looked like a pair of cargo shorts on the ground. As they walked closer, "What's that smell? You smell that?" Jason asked. "Smells like electrical ozone," stated Keith. "Yeah, but we're in the middle of fucking woods," Jason said. Keith bent over to pick up the shorts, and Jason yelled and grabbed Keith and pulled him back. "What the fuck, Jason?" Keith said, shocked. "Look at where the snake boots are, and how they're laying out. The hills are facing each other, and his fucking belt is buckled." "Are you sure those are his shorts?" Keith asked harshly. "Keith, man, I've seen him wear them shorts 1,000 times, Jason said, almost in a panic. "What's at the top?" Keith asked as he picked up a stick. "See? Look," he said as he used the stick to gently move his waistband with his belt still in its loops. The familiar Fruit of Loom logo appeared, and this caused Keith and Jason to jump back when a realization that Nate's underwear was perfectly still inside his shorts. "Are you serious? Are you fucking serious? How is that possible?" Keith on the verge of tears. And Jason said, "We gotta check on one more thing." "Please be wrong. Please be wrong," Jason kept saying to himself, as he knelt down and took Keith's flashlight and looked in one of the boots. As he was getting up, he noticed Nate's knife was still clipped to his pocket of his shorts, and Jason walked to the nearest tree and vomited. "What's wrong, Jason?" Keith asked. "His socket's perfectly flat. It's bent around the heel towards the toe," Jason said, pointing to the boot. Keith went to dial the others, and Jason stopped him. "What are you doing, man?" Keith asked with shock in his voice. "We gotta take some pictures. We gotta take pictures. You shoot a video, get everything," Jason directed. They finished taking the video and pictures, and Jason squatted down on his heels and said, "Little brother, I don't know what happened to you. I just hope it happened quick. Your big brother Mason. Oh man, he's gonna miss you," Jason said as he broke down and cried. "Are you really sure that's Nate?" asked Keith. "How do you lay out clothes like that, and why would you lay clothes out like that? You're in the middle of the fucking woods after an accident. Why would you do it? It's like he melted away," Jason said, unbelieving. "That's fucking crazy talk, man," said Keith. "Hey Keith, brother, don't tell anybody we took pictures," Jason stated. "Why?" Keith asked. Jason walked up to Keith and got into his face and said, "You keep your goddamn mouth shut about the pictures," and Jason said as he put his hand on Keith's shoulders. Keith nodded, a little scared. "Now, make the call," Jason said while tears streamed down his face, as he sat down with his back against the tree as the smell of the ozone dominated the area. Within 30 minutes, the area was alive with deputies, game wardens, and the newly arrived search and rescue units. The search captain came up and looked at the area and the evidence still on the ground and said, "Okay, let me get this straight. He gets in an accident, walks almost over 1,000 feet in a direction that would have not taken him anywhere towards his truck, and then strips naked and lays his clothes out in such a way that makes absolutely no sense, and then walks somewhere into the woods buck-ass naked. Am I missing something here?" The group was silent, and then the captain says, "All right, everybody, buddy up. We're going to search this whole area. Oh, and by the way, do we know what kind of shirt he was wearing?" Mason then answered, "Chances are he wasn't wearing one. He rarely wore one while running his side-by-side." And one of the searchers, which was about to walk out to their section to search for Nate, said, "Hey, what's that?" As he was pointing up in the tree, there, twisting in the wind, was a green t-shirt about 30 feet up into the tree canopy. as the rest of the group, about 30 or so, stood and watched while Mason and Jason climbed the tree. Mason got to the shirt first and with a loud "fuck me" dropped the shirt to the ground. Keith then picked it up and Marty gasped and said, "That's Nate's. He wore that the first time we met. That's definitely his shirt." The search captain looked at the senior deputy there and said, "So, we definitely have a 31-year-old man, naked, walking around out here in the woods." The captain shook his head. "It doesn't make any sense." The deputy responded, "It would appear so." And then he instructed the other deputies to process and collect the clothing and personal effects, and then join the search by 2 p.m. The group searched for 3 days and found absolutely nothing. No further evidence, no further sign of any kind, and the search was called off and Nate was listed as missing. Jason and Mason were allowed to recover Nate's razor after it was processed, and the deputies turned Nate's pickup and trailer over to Mason, and everyone teamed up and brought his stuff back to his house. Marty, Keith, Travis and Jason were sitting on the porch of Nate's house. It was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. As Mason's truck pulled into the drive, he was just getting back from the area. He got out and Jason could see that he was at a raging pitch. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he said, looking up Marty. Marty sat there shocked that he would even ask that question. "Haven't you done enough already to this family? My brother is missing, probably gone for good. Why are you here? You looking to pick up another one of us to replace him, huh?" Mason growled. Travis stepped up and said, "That's enough, Mason." "Why the hell are you taking up for him? Why did you even introduce my brother to this pervert? My brother wasn't gay. Why would you even involve him with this piece of shit?" Mason said with extreme agitation. At that point, Jason stepped in front of Marty and put his hand on Marty's stomach and pushed Marty behind him, because Jason could see Mason was getting a head of steam up top and ready to throw a punch. Jason piped up and said, "Mason, brother, we are all hurting here. We lost our brother, and some of us have lost a friend, and at least one of us lost something special. And just a little FYI, Mason Gerald Gunner, Nate told me 2 weeks ago that he thought he wanted to live with Marty full time, and that he was sure that Marty was right for him, and that being queer was right for him too. He would have told you and me at the same time, but Nate said you would never understand and that you would never hear him." Mason was completely taken off guard by Jason's words and turned to Marty and said, "You might have all the rest of these guys fooled, but you don't have me fooled at all. You stay away from our kids, my wife and me. You stay away from us." He turned and walked away and got into his truck, started it and peeled out, throwing gravel all the way out of the drive. Jason put his hands on top of his head and stood there and took a breath. And Marty said, "Guys, I guess I better go." And Jason said, "Why? My brother Nate wanted you a part of this family, whether you like it or not." As he walked over to Nate's truck and put his hands on the fender and said, "Why does he have to be such a shit?" In quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is any of a variety of mathematical inequalities, asserting a fundamental limit to the precision with which the values for a certain pairs of physical quantities of a particle not stated. Werner Karl Heisenberg. Nate wiped his eyes and tried to focus on the flashes of the lights that were dissipating, and then he noticed movement, something with mass and stature. He saw the movement. It wasn't like any movement that he'd ever seen before. The shape of the silhouette was of a large man, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, broad shoulders with a small waist and strong arms, all by the details in the outline of the shape against the background of the woodline setting. But the edges of the shape was lit and highlighted by what he could only call sparklers. Like a 4th of July party, but the sparks were being pulled into the center of the silhouette, as golden streaks of light racing across the black background that faded the closer they got to the center, and with the edges of the silhouette remaining sharp and defined. Its legs by the edge of the shape were well developed, and then where the feet should have been, there were hoofs like that of a bull. The head of the silhouette shape had a strong, thick neck and horns that sat on top of the head, that flared out and then curved upwards. The streaks of light seemed to travel all over the silhouette, and the eyes were of a hazy blue, almond-shaped, inset and slightly contrasted with the golden streaks through the black background of the shape. Nate was in an almost trance-like state, and with the vision of the silhouette, but his trance state was broken when the shape turned to its right and revealed that it was paper thin. There was no depth, no thickness, and no dimension. It didn't seem to notice him, and he stood watching it, as it was oblivious to his presence. Nate could not see where this thing came from, no vehicle, no nothing, and then the overwhelming feeling that he was being watched penetrated his euphoria. He turned to his left, and he saw another one of these things, less than 6 feet away from him, and fear gripped him. This fear was unlike anything he had ever felt before. The thing was looking right at him. The hazy blue eyes were piercing and actively scanning over his body. It reached for him, and he screamed and moved away, tripping over his helmet on the ground and falling on his left side. He scrambled to his feet and bolted away from the razor, ducking through the woods and looking back and seeing one of the things following him, and it seemed to be gaining on him, and he was in full-out run. As he was running, he thought he was well clear of the things, and when he noticed that one of those things was now in front of him, as it turned towards him, going from paper-thin to a large silhouette. He jumped to the right and avoided a sweep of an arm of the shape, but ran full speed into the trunk of a large tree, knocking him almost unconscious, and laying him out on the ground under the large tree canopy. He was still trying to move away, but he was pinned by the shape. It was merely 2 feet from his body as it stopped over him. Out of breath, he asked, "What do you want?" The shape said. I don't understand. Please don't hurt me," Nate pleaded.
Sumi astoma.
As it touched his chest with the end of its index finger and moved it over his chest down to his belly button.
Pina koe baka,
it said. It stood back up and walked backwards several steps, and then the pain hit him. It was like an arc welder etching into his chest, and he screamed in agony as he noticed a vapor rising out of the fissure that was opening up in his chest, and the vapor was trailing into the stream towards the shape. The vaporous trail snaked up in the right leg of the shape and twisted around its waist and disappeared into the shape's body. Nate was paralyzed with fear and pain as his flesh, bone and tissue began a slow disintegration into quantum parts, photons, neutrons, and the electrical discharges from his body's electrons that were conducted into the ground. The fissure deepened and widened. The pain increased. Nate was writhing on the ground and was beginning to convulse. He screamed, "Please, no! No, please! Make it stop!" And the agony was escalating with every second. He felt his breath being taken as the force began to disintegrate the lobes in his lungs. He was suffocating. And as the last breaths left his body, he saw the cloud of particles moving from his body like a torrent of a flooded stream, rushing down the mountain and then diving into the shape's silhouette. As he said with the sadness of a man accepting his fate, "I love you, Marty. I love..." And then he fell silent as the fissure began to dissolve his heart. As he settled onto his back, and as life left his body, his shorts collapsed flat and his body fell perfectly split hill to hill. And within 40 seconds, he was nothing more than just a green shirt, cargo shorts with reflective tape and a snake boots laying hill to hill. The shape, now bristling with strength and power, was joined by another shape. As the shape closest to where Nate was laying touched its chest in an upward motion, and, at about 20 feet from them, a disc that was standing on its edge and arcing lighting across the top of it appeared, and the shapes moved over to it and stood with their backs to the disc, and then a clamshell-type force field enveloped them, and then it collapsed into the disc as the disc disappeared in a cloud of electrical charges. The wind burst from this event, lifting Nate's green shirt up into the tree canopy, and then dissipated. One year later. Jason and Keith began to research and ask if other weird disappearances were occurring in the area. They found several that could have been considered unusual, but no one really wanted to discuss them. They had taken their story of Nate's disappearance to several online radio shows and had submitted their pictures and video to the Canam Project, which is a project that takes a look at unusual cases of missing persons. The case is pending a review with the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigations, but the case keeps getting passed over as inconclusive. As for Mason, he still will not talk to Marty and has made himself distant from Jason and Travis. He keeps a picture of Nate as a screensaver on his phone, and so he looks at his brother every day. He didn't go to Nate's memorial services, it was just too hard. It took a while for Marty to come to terms with what happened, and if it wasn't for Jason and Travis, it would have been incredibly difficult to deal with. But time heals and life moves forward, even when remembering your life's experiences. Marty asked if Jason and Travis would go with him and let him see where Nate's clothes were found one last time, so he could put some closure on this part of his life. Jason agreed, and Travis borrowed his friend's 4-door side-by-side that would allow them to get back into the area. And when they arrived at the site, it really hadn't changed that much. Marty placed some flowers and 2 beers, and Nate's favourite pair of boxer underwear with his tool belt and a pair of flip-flops. Marty stood and looked all around, and the air smelled fresh and peaceful. Jason and Travis walked around the area, giving Marty some private time, but Marty, not wanting to make this any harder than it already was, said, "We can go now, and thanks for bringing him." And then the odour of the ozone crossed the wind. And Travis was the first to notice and went to inspect the side-by-side. And Jason said, "Isn't that the damnedest thing?" as they began to walk back to the side-by-side. As from across the dimensional membrane, Nate was banging his fists on the force field of the edge of our dimension, trying to get their attention, screaming at the top of his lungs, and they just couldn't hear him or see him. "I love you, Marty," he said futilely. "I love you." And just then, he heard a screeching as a lomothoid, a type of gugwe in the space in between dimensions, approached. Nate took a last look on the side-by-side as it drove away and turned, showing his paper-thin state of being, and ran down the path to oblivion. Is our fear of the unknown so commanding that we cannot comprehend that there are things that we do not understand, that cause us to blindly allow the dismissal of evidence of their existence? Or do we choose to allow our perceived superiority to supersede their dominance? The Large Hadron Collider is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It first started up on the 10th of September 2008 and remains the latest addition to the CERN's accelerator complex. One has to wonder what this high-tech piece of machinery has allowed to enter our world. It's not merely penetrating dimensions. It very well could be allowing monsters to slip into our reality from in between the countless dimensions as outlined by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. These monsters are being allowed to wreak havoc undetected, wrecking lives and dreams of the victims they encounter. But here in the bottoms of the Deep Fork River, something continues to feed. Living matter evades the decay of equilibrium. Erwin Schrodinger. On the next episode of the Disappearances of the Deep Fork River Bottoms, God himself wishes he never created them, because now, in order to get rid of them, it would mean an entire recalculation of the natural order of things. They are known by the Huye Shavo, Nagal, Yinolushi, and Skinwalker. Until next time, if you see a brilliant flash of light, run. Wow. Absolutely awesome, chest-pounding, mysterious stuff there from the incredible mind of my good friend Ed Smith. As ever, huge thank you, Ed, for penning this very intriguing and chilling story. Certainly sets the mind to wondering about all the ifs and whats and maybes surrounding all of these disappearances and unusual missing persons cases. As ever, guys and girls, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag Team Fear? As always, I hope you guys are doing well, keeping fit as possible, keeping positive and focused, and above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.